Oh, darlings, gather round for a tale that would make even the most jaded Regency rake blush crimson. Imagine if your morning tea came laced with the scandalous secrets of Danish colonials, where exploration meant far more than planting flags. In his era of powdered wigs and plundered lands, the Danes turned their icy gaze southward, treating human bodies like commodities in a twisted game of Monopoly, but with whips instead of hotels. And honey, if you think modern dating apps are predatory, wait until you hear about the breeding programs that make Tinder look like a church picnic. If this tickles your scandalous fancy, smash that subscribe button like a colonial overseer cracking a whip. Tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And is it past your bedtime or just getting steamy? Don't be shy, we're all voyeurs here. Ah, my dears, let us plunge into the frothy depths of history's most salacious underbelly, where the Danish colonial period from 1620 to 1944 unfolds like a forbidden pamphlet passed under drawing-room tables. Picture it, Denmark, that quaint little kingdom of fairy tales and butter cookies, stretching its greedy fingers across oceans to snatch up territories like a debutante collecting suitors. But oh, the viciousness beneath the veneer. We're talking about practices so depraved they'd make Lord Byron pen a sequel to Don Juan just to cope. And in true Regency scandal sheet fashion, I'll dish the gossip with a wink, a nod, and a hefty dose of irony, because nothing says enlightened empire like exploiting the vulnerable while sipping aquavit. Let's start with the Danish West Indies, those sun-kissed specks in the Caribbean, St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix, acquired in the 17th century like bargain bin jewels at a colonial flea market. From 1672 onward, the Danes imported enslaved Africans by the shipload, estimating a whopping 120,000 souls dragged across the Atlantic in chains. Imagine the scene. Pristine beaches turned into hellish plantations, where sugarcane wasn't the only thing being harvested. No, my witty watchers, the real crop was human misery, fertilized by the most vicious sexual exploitations imaginable. Enter the white planters, those strutting Danish dandies in linen suits, fanning themselves while fancying themselves gods. They viewed enslaved women as mere property, ripe for the plucking. Rape? Oh, it was as commonplace as afternoon tea, but with none of the cucumber sandwiches. Historical accounts paint a grim portrait, enslaved women forced into sexual servitude, their bodies commodified for pleasure and profit. One particularly odious practice was breeding. Yes, you heard that right, like livestock at a county fair. Planters encouraged, nay, coerced couplings to produce more slaves, boosting their workforce without the hassle of transatlantic shipping costs. It's like a dystopian version of modern fertility apps, but instead of tracking ovulation, it was tracking ownership. Eddie Donohue's tome, Black Women, White Men, The Sexual Exploitation of Female Slaves in the Danish West Indies, spills the tea on this. White men routinely assaulted black women, siring mixed-race children who were often enslaved themselves, perpetuating a cycle of horror. Gossip from the era's court records? Pure gold for our scandal-loving souls. In the Danish West Indies, enslaved individuals occasionally dragged their abusers before judges, brave souls narrating tales of rape and abuse in a system rigged against them. Picture a courtroom drama worthy of a Netflix binge. An enslaved woman, let's call her our Regency heroine in chains, recounting how her master treated her bed like his personal conquest map.
But irony abounds. These trials were often a farce, with Danish law turning a blind eye, much like a society matron ignoring her husband's mistress at a ball. The power imbalance was staggering. Women stratified by gender and race, their bodies battlegrounds for colonial lust. Compare it to today's headlines. Powerful men exploiting the vulnerable. Only back then there was no Me Too, just the crack of the whip. And let's not forget the everyday viciousness. Enslaved women faced not just rape, but the psychological torment of seeing their children sold off like unwanted heirlooms. It's a plot twist straight from a Gothic novel, motherhood twisted into a tool of empire building. In the plantations, sexual violence was woven into the fabric of daily life, with overseers meting out punishments that blurred lines between discipline and depravity. Oh, the hypocrisy! Danes at home priding themselves on Lutheran piety, while abroad their colonies reeked of sin. It's like comparing a Jane Austen ball to a frat party gone wrong. Etiquette upstairs, exploitation downstairs. Shifting our gaze northward, but we'll save the full frosty details for later parts, tease, the Danes had their icy grip on Greenland from 1721. Here, the viciousness took a subtler, yet no less scandalous form. Traditional Inuit society, delightfully open about premarital dalliances, with norms that would make a modern swinger blush. But enter the colonizers, Bibles in hand, redefining sin to suit their prude palates. Sexual behaviors once natural became taboo, with missionaries imposing Christian monogamy like an ill-fitting corset. Rumors of explorers mingling with locals, whispered in pamphlets back home, no doubt. Venereal diseases spread like wildfire, courtesy of Danish gifts. It's modernization meets molestation, irony at its finest. But back to the West Indies for a moment more. The trade itself was a breeding ground for abuse. Ships crammed with captives, where sexual violence ran rampant during the Middle Passage. Captains and crews treating women as spoils before auction. Modern comparison, think of it as the ultimate bad cruise. Endless seas, zero consent. And in the colonies, the Code Noir, borrowed from the French but Danish-flavored, barely protected anyone, allowing masters free rein. Gossip mills churned with stories of mulatto offspring rising in status, but at what cost? A vicious cycle of colorism and control. Darlings, this is just the appetizer in our feast of folly. The Danes' colonial playbook read like a scandal sheet. Exploit, abuse, repeat. With wit as our weapon, we expose the irony. Empires built on backs and beds, all while preaching civility. Stay tuned, the chill of Greenland awaits. And so, as the sun sets on Part 1's tropical terrors, remember, the Danes didn't just colonize land, they colonized lust itself. Tune in next for the frozen follies that'll make your blood run cold, or hot, depending on your scandal threshold. Well, if Part 1 left you fanning yourself over Caribbean capers, brace for the Arctic antics where Danish colonials turned Greenland into their personal icebox of iniquity. Think Regency balls on permafrost, but with more sealskins and sinister seductions. Imagine swiping right on a colonizer's app. Likes, whale blubber, forced assimilation, and a side of exploitation. Vicious? Darling, it's colder than a jilted lover's stare.
My inquisitive inquirers, welcome back to our Regency-inspired romp through Denmark's colonial closet of skeletons, now with a polar twist. From 1620 to 1944, the Danes didn't just dabble in tropical tyrannies. Oh no, they ventured north to Greenland, that vast icy expanse claimed in 1721 by missionary Hans Egede, who probably thought he was bringing salvation but delivered a sleigh full of scandals instead. Picture the gossip, Copenhagen salons buzzing with tales of fur-clad frontiersmen civilizing the Inuit, all while indulging in practices that would make a London libertine raise an eyebrow. Sarcasm alert, because nothing screams progress like imposing your bedroom rules on an entire culture. Traditional Greenlandic society? A veritable utopia of sexual freedom, where premarital escapades were as accepted as sharing a seal steak. Inuit norms celebrated openness, no shame in same-sex curiosities, no scarlet letters for extramarital flings, but enter the Danes, with their Christian corsets tightening around native necks. Colonizers redefined Inuit behaviors as sinful, using sexuality as a cudgel to justify control. It's like crashing a free love festival with a Bible-thumping brigade. Irony thicker than pack ice. Missionaries preached monogamy while whispers of their own dalliances echoed through igloos. Historical accounts from the early 1700s narrate Eggede's encounters, Danish traders ingratiating themselves with locals, often through intimate means. Modern comparison? Think colonial Tinder, where matches were made with muskets. The viciousness ramped up with the introduction of venereal diseases, syphilis and gonorrhea spreading like rumors at a ball, courtesy of Danish visitors. Inuit women bore the brunt, their bodies battlefields in this microbial warfare. Exploitation? Abundant. Colonizers exploited power imbalances for sexual favors, turning trade posts into dens of depravity. Gossip from pamphlets? Stories of forced cohabitation, where Inuit women were taken as concubines. Their autonomy melted away like spring snow. And the irony? Danes decrying primitive practices while perpetuating their own brand of barbarism. Fast forward through the centuries, by the 19th and early 20th, Danish governance deepened the scars. Assimilation policies treated Inuit like wayward wards, with sexual control at the core. High rates of abuse emerged, precursors to later horrors like the forced IUD campaign, though post-1944 it echoes the era's ethos. Childhood sexual abuse? Rampant, with colonial structures enabling silence. Imagine isolated settlements, Danish officials wielding authority like Regency lords over servants. Women reported assaults, but justice? As elusive as the Northern Lights. It's a tragic farce. Empire's protection translating to predation. Compared to the West Indies' overt brutality, here it was insidious, wrapped in paternalism, yet vicious all the same, eliminating sexual norms to erode culture, introducing diseases that decimated populations. Pamphlets back home painted Greenland as exotic, but the reality? Exploitation under auroras. And let's not ignore the hybrid children, offspring of unions, often unequal, navigating identities in a colonized world. Irony? Danes modernizing sexuality while regressing human rights. Tying back to broader empire, similar threads in other outposts, but Greenland's chill amplified the cruelty. Witty aside, if colonial West Indies was a steamy romance novel, Greenland was its frozen thriller sequel. Stay scandalized. Part 3 beckons with more.
Darlings, if the tropics scorched and the Arctic chilled, prepare for the spicy finale in Danish India and beyond, where colonials traded spices but spiced up far more with vicious vices. Think of it as a Bollywood remake of a Regency scandal. Elephants, exploitation, and enough irony to sink a ship. Modern twist? It's like colonialism's greatest hits album remixed with depravity. Oh, my scandal-savvy spectators, we've traversed seas and snows. Now for the crowning jewels of Denmark's colonial crown jewels, or should I say, cubic zirconias of cruelty. From 1620 to 1944, the Danes dabbled in India with Tranquebar, now Tharangambadi, a coastal enclave snatched in 1620 like a forgotten invitation to the imperial ball. Here, amid monsoon rains and masala scents, vicious sexual practices simmered beneath the trade facade. Gossip? The Danish East India Company wasn't just shipping silks, they trafficked in human flesh, with slavery's shadow looming large. Enslaved individuals from Africa and locals faced exploitation akin to the West Indies, rape as a tool of dominance, women reduced to concubines in colonial compounds. Traders ingratiated with rajas, but behind closed doors, assaults on vulnerable populations, blending economic greed with carnal conquest. Irony abounds, Danes preaching European superiority while behaving like barbarians at a banquet. Modern parallel? Corporate overlords exploiting overseas labor, but with 17th century flair. Pamphlets whispered of mixed-race liaisons, children born of coercion, perpetuating hierarchies. Broadening the lens, across colonies, patterns emerged. In the Faroes and Iceland, subtler controls, but sexual norms shifted under Danish rule. Overall, the era's viciousness, systemic, rape in warfare's shadow, though Denmark avoided major conflicts. Yet in colonies, it was everyday empire. Compared to today's global inequalities, same playbook, updated edition. Synthesizing our saga, West Indies' breeding horrors, Greenland's cultural erosions, India's trade-tainted abuses, all under Denmark's flag. The irony? A nation now lauded for equality, built on exploitation's back. Witty rap? History's scandals teach us, empires fall, but gossip endures. Thus ends our tour de force of Danish depravities. Remember, the most vicious practices aren't in history books, they're in the empires we still ignore. Until next scandal, stay sarcastic. Oh, my deliciously depraved darlings, we've scorched in the Caribbean, frozen in Greenland, and spiced things up in India. Now for the grand finale, Africa's Gold Coast forts and the lingering echoes of empire that make modern Denmark's equality blush like a virgin at an orgy. Imagine colonial Danes trading gold for souls, only to leave a legacy of guilt thicker than aquavit. Vicious practices that history swept under the rug, but we're here to flip it over. My scandalous sophisticates, we've danced through Denmark's imperial dalliances, but no finale is complete without the African chapter, the Gold Coast forts, those brooding bastions from 1658 to 1850, where Danes played slaver like it was a genteel hobby. Picture Fort Christiansborg, that whitewashed whale of a structure in present-day Ghana, headquarters for trading gold, ivory, and, whisper it, human flesh. Denmark-Norway snatched these outposts, building 5 key forts.
Christiansborg, Fredensborg, and others all humming with the triangular trade's horrors. Slaves captured inland, marched to the coast, crammed into dungeons awaiting Danish ships bound for the West Indies. Estimates? Over 100,000 Africans funneled through Danish hands, many perishing en route or in the holds. But the viciousness, darlings? Not just chains and auctions. Inside those fort walls, decadence reigned supreme. Historical whispers, and the 2015 film Gold Coast spills it vividly, paint orgies where Danish officials, drunk on power and rum, raped local women in scenes straight from a debauched pamphlet. Snakes slithering amid overturned wine glasses and violated bodies? Symbolic, sure, but rooted in accounts of corruption and assault. Local women, often from nearby villages, faced coercion for favors in exchange for trade perks or mere survival. Irony alert? These civilizers preaching Lutheran virtue while turning forts into dens of depravity. Modern comparison? Think elite frat houses abroad, exploiting locals under the guise of exploration. Gossip from the era? Sparse as Danish records gloss over the grit, but echoes persist. Governors and traders mingling unequally, siring mixed-race children abandoned or absorbed into hierarchies. Venereal diseases? Spread like colonial rumors courtesy of these encounters. And the power play, Danes wielding muskets and authority over chiefs like Asante leaders who supplied captives from wars. One chief, Poby, happily traded prisoners to Fredensborg's Danes. Vicious cycle, war for slaves, slaves for guns, repeat. Compared to today's arms trades, same hypocrisy, updated uniforms. Tying our threads, across West Indies' breeding horrors, Greenland's cultural suppressions, India's subtler exploitations, and Africa's fort abuses, patterns scream systemic viciousness. Rape as dominance tool, bodies as currency, sexuality weaponized for control. In the West Indies, house slaves endured routine assaults. In Greenland, diseases and forced monogamy eroded freedoms. In Tranquebar, concubines in compounds. On the Gold Coast, orgiastic excesses, all while Copenhagen sipped tea, pretending piety. Now the legacy. Oh, the delicious irony. Denmark, poster child for gender equality and happiness rankings, grapples with colonial ghosts. In Greenland, ongoing debates, high rates of sexual abuse linked to colonial disruptions, forced assimilations echoing in modern traumas. Reconciliation commissions highlight structural discrimination, Inuit women bearing scars of imposed norms. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, former West Indies, centennials reignited slavery talks, but Denmark's response? Tepid like a lukewarm aquavit. And home in Denmark, colonial amnesia fuels Nordic exceptionalism. We're too enlightened for racism's rot. Yet whispers of hypersexual others linger in immigrant debates, echoes of old stereotypes. Modern sexual liberation? Denmark pioneered porn legalization in the 60s, but colonial exploitation's shadow questioned true equality. Victim blaming in rape cases? High reported assaults, some tied to unexamined power imbalances from empire days. Pamphlets of yore stereotyped colonized as primitive sexually. Today, subtle biases persist.
Darlings, this saga exposes empire's underbelly, vicious practices not anomalies, but architecture. Danes colonized bodies as boldly as lands, breeding, assaulting, controlling desires to build wealth. Hypocrisy? Preaching progress while perpetrating pain. Modern twist, Denmark's feminist foreign policy ignores its past, much like ignoring a mistress at a ball. But history gossips eternally. We've unearthed the irony. Empires rise on exploitation, fall on denial. And thus, curtain on our Danish depravity quartet. The most vicious practices weren't just historical, they're the rotten roots beneath today's egalitarian facade. Stay witty, stay woke, until the next scandal sheet. My insatiable scandal seekers, we've plundered the Caribbean plantations, chilled in Greenland's cultural corsets, spiced India's trade posts, and wallowed in Africa's fort follies. Now for the ultimate unmasking. Denmark's gleaming facade of equality built on buried bodies and silenced screams. Imagine the hypocrisy of a nation topping happiness chart while its colonial closet overflows with skeletons. Vicious practices that didn't end in 1944, darlings. They just went undercover. Modern twist? It's like a wellness guru preaching mindfulness while hiding a dungeon of depravity. Oh, my enlightened eavesdroppers, we've traipsed through Denmark's imperial indiscretions from tropics to tundra, but the true viciousness, it's the velvet-gloved hypocrisy lingering like a bad Regency romance hangover. Denmark, that butter-cookie beacon of gender equality and hygge happiness, prides itself on progressive piety, yet its colonial legacy festers, a festering irony that would make Austin arch an eyebrow. From 1620 to 1944 and beyond, the Danes didn't just exploit lands, they colonized desires, bodies, and futures, all while polishing a self-image of exceptionalism. Nordic innocence? Please. It's colonial amnesia wrapped in welfare state wool. Let's linger on the Gold Coast finale we teased, those brooding forts like Christiansborg in Ghana, bastions of trade from 1658 to 1850. Here, Danes funneled over 100,000 Africans into hellish holds, bound for Caribbean sugar hells. But the abuses? Not just chains. Inside those whitewashed walls, depravity danced. The 2015 film Gold Coast captures it vividly. Orgies amid overturned rum glasses, Danish officials raping local women while snakes slither symbolically through the sin. Historical whispers confirm coercion for favors, concubines in compounds, venereal diseases as colonial calling cards, castle slaves, enslaved Africans living outside but toiling within, faced routine exploitation, their bodies bartered like ivory. Irony, Danes decrying African primitivism while perpetuating barbarism behind cannons. Modern comparison, elite expats abroad, exploiting locals under development disguises.
Synthesizing our salacious saga, West Indies' systematic rapes and breeding programs, where house slaves endured assaults as casually as tea, Greenland's insidious erosions, imposing monogamy on free-loving Inuit, spreading syphilis like salvation, culminating in post-1944 horrors like forced IUDs on thousands of girls, often without consent, to curb overpopulation. Tranquebar, subtler, but concubines and colorism persisted. Africa's forts, orgies and ownership. Across empires, sexuality weaponized, rape for dominance, breeding for profit, control for culture crushing. Pamphlets back home romanticized explorers. Reality reeked of rape.
Now, the lingering lash, Denmark's equality hypocrisy. Today, lauded for feminist policies and top happiness rankings, yet colonial ghosts haunt. In Greenland, high sexual abuse rates, 20% of children exposed, tied to disrupted norms, poverty, alcoholism from modernization, suicide epidemics, domestic violence, echoes of paternalism. Forced contraception scandals reinforce control over Inuit bodies. In Denmark proper, structural racism against Inuit migrants, barriers in housing, health, jobs. UN experts decry colonial legacy as systemic discrimination. And the amnesia, deliciously vicious. Danes cling to Nordic exceptionalism. We're too enlightened for racism's rot. Colonial history, glossed over, sold off like the Virgin Islands in 1917. No major memorials, tepid apologies, yet stereotypes linger. Hypersexual others in immigrant debates. High reported assaults, victim blaming, unexamined power imbalances from empire days. Porn legalization in the 60s? Progressive, sure, but shadows of exploiting colonized bodies question true liberation. Gossip from today? Black Lives Matter ripples reached Denmark, toppling a few statues, but amnesia persists. Virgin Islanders remember Danish chains. Danes often blank stares. Hypocrisy abounds, a nation preaching global equality while grappling ghosts. Compare to Regency rakes, public virtue, private vice. Empires built on beds and backs, preaching civility. Witty truth, vicious practices weren't anomalies, they were architecture. Denmark colonized lust, legacy, and lies. Darlings, this penultimate plunge exposes the punchline. Equality's throne sits on exploitation's bones. History's scandals scream, ignore at your peril. One more tease, the grand reckoning awaits. As we bid adieu to Part 5's hypocritical horrors, remember, Denmark's vicious colonial vices didn't vanish, they just donned a progressive disguise. Stay tuned for the series finale that'll shatter the Hygge illusion forever.